In today's video, I'm going to deliberate upon W. Quine's famous paper, Two Dogmas of Empiricism. This paper was originally published in the journal, The Philosophical Review, in the year 1951. So, as evident from the title of the paper, Two Dogmas of Empiricism, the content of the paper is pointing to the two dogmatic belief system of modern empiricism and also criticizing it. Dogmas are basically the principles of beliefs which are accepted as true without questioning. They are accepted as authoritative without questioning. They are accepted in particularly in a group philosophy or in religion. Okay, so often they are fundamental to the teachings of a particular group. So here in the case of modern empiricists, they had a belief in two dogmas. The first is the the cleavage between analytic and synthetic statements. Truths that are analytic, independent of matter of fact, and truth which are synthetic, grounded in fact. So the two dogmas which W. Quine is referring to in his paper, Two Dogmas of Empiricism, are first one is the cleavage between truths that are analytic, independent of matter of fact, and grounded in meaning, and number two, truths that are synthetic, which is grounded in fact. So the cleavage between analytic and synthetic truths, this is the first dogma which W. Quine is referring to in his paper, Two Dogmas of Empiricism. And the second dogma is the dogma about reductionism. And what is reductionism? Reductionism is a belief that each meaningful statement is equivalent to logical constructs upon terms, which refers to immediate experience. That we will be diving into when we shall discuss about the second dogma. But in this video, we shall be pondering the first dogma exclusively. So the dogma about the cleavage, the dogma of the cleavage between analytic truths and synthetic truths. This division between analytic and synthetic is traced back to the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. German philosopher Immanuel Kant was the proponent of the distinction between analytic and synthetic judgments. But the germ of the cleavage can also be traced in the philosophy of David Hume and in his distinction between relations of ideas and matter of fact. Relations of ideas are just similar to, it's same as analytic statements, analytic judgments. Relations, knowledge based upon relations of ideas are just a reflection of our intellect. In that case, knowledge, this sort of knowledge which are based upon relations of ideas, does not require us to acquire empirical evidence. So this is solely based on a priori reasoning. We are talking about analytic judgments and its historical traces. And historically, the germ of analytic and synthetic distinction is found in the philosophy of David Hume, and his distinction between relations of ideas and matter of fact just resembles Kantian distinction between analytic and synthetic truths. Now again, if we look back to the philosophy of Leibniz, we shall find that he is also making a distinction between truths of reason and truths of fact. Truths of reason, according to Leibniz, truths in statements that are true in all possible worlds. He is the first person who introduced the notion of possible worlds, the modality. So truths of reason are such statements which are true in all possible worlds and whose denials are self-contradictory, and opposite of which is impossible. So they are true in all situations, all possible situations, and they are known a priori. We need not to accumulate empirical evidence to know the truth of this knowledge, of this sort of knowledge. So Kant has defined analytic and synthetic truths in that way, that the predicate B, either the predicate B belongs to the subject A as something which is covertly contained in it, or B lies outside the concept A, although it stands in some relation with it. So basically I'm just pronouncing Kant's distinction. Now I'm going to paraphrase his account of analytic synthetic distinction. Kant is saying that for analytic statements, the predicate is conceptually contained in the subject, and in the case of synthetic truths, the predicate lies outside the concept of subject, although it stands in some relation to it, to the subject. He is using the phrase conceptual containment while he was describing analyticity, and Quine has picked up this particular phrase, that conceptual containment, and criticized this as this phrase has been left at a metaphorical level. What Kant actually intend to convey while he was telling that conceptual containment, that predicate of a statement is subject predicate statement. In the case of subject predicate statement, the predicate term is conceptually contained in the subject term. So this has been left at a metaphorical level, and so this lacks clarification as far Quine's criticism against Kantian definition is concerned. So as we have mentioned just now, that the cleavage between analytic and synthetic truths can be traced back to the philosophy of David Hume and Leibniz. Now, Kant's intent was that analytic truths are truths. A statement is analytic if and only if it is true by virtue of meaning, independent of matter of fact. So now the whole discussion boils down to the notion of meaning. We first started with the first dogma, the cleavage between analytic and synthetic truths. Then we have traced out the history, the germs of the cleavage in the philosophy of the predecessor of Immanuel Kant, David Hume and Leibniz. We have understood their definitions of analytic and synthetic statements and their different nomenclatures. So now we came to the definition of Immanuel Kant, the definition of analyticity as given by Immanuel Kant. For Immanuel Kant, his intention of defining analytic statement was such that statements are analytic if and only if the truth of these statements are established by virtue of meaning, independently of matter of fact. So the whole discussion finally boils down to the notion of meaning. Now, what sort of entity meaning are? What is the entity called meaning? So this is the most important question in the paper, Two Dogmas of Empiricism. Now, Quine has encountered the problem of meaning he has spotted, he located the primary notion of meaning on the basis of which the distinction is based upon. Now, what is meaning? Meaning, once it is differentiated from the theory of reference, this is one step ahead to recognizing that meaning, the theory of meaning, has to do with synonymy of linguistic forms. So already we have advanced to the level that theory of that meaning is different from reference or naming. Okay, so this is an advancement, and this advancement enable us to proceed one step ahead to recognizing that it has something to do with synonymy of linguistic form. Now, what is synonymy? Now, on refinement of meaning, we came to the realm of synonymy. Now, what is synonymy? Well, two terms are synonymous when two terms are identified as synonymy by a lexicographer in a dictionary. But who are lexicographers? Lexicographers are empirical scientists who record the usage of two terms as synonymous, which are already used in a community as synonymous. So they just record, they merely record terms as synonymous in a community that are already used as a. So this reflects that people are already using two terms interchangeably, and synonymy is in fact grounded in usage. It is grounded in the usage of, linguistic behavior of a certain community. And the task of lexicographer with regard to synonymy is to just record how people are using two terms synonymous in a community, which are already used interchangeably. So instead of explaining what is synonymy, they are just recording synonymous terms. These not at all explain what is synonymy. So the endeavor to explain analyticity in terms of synonymy it goes in vain. It does not work at all. So now another attempt has been made. So next attempt is to define synonymy, is to define analyticity in terms of definition. Say for example, married man. Unmarried man is a bachelor. So a bachelor is an unmarried man. So in that case, an unmarried man is synonymous with bachelor. And just now we have described that lexicographer just record that two terms are synonymous, which reflects that people are already using two terms interchangeably. So instead of explaining what is synonymy, what is the sufficient and necessary criteria of synonymity, they just keep on recording terms as synonymous. It is based on usage. It just reflects linguistic behavior of a community. That's all. Now, definition. Now, if we attempt to define analyticity in terms of definition, then what would happen? Let's see. What is the definition of bachelor? Bachelor is a term. Now, if we try to excavate the relation, what is the analyticity relation, unmarried man is a bachelor, this is an analytic statement, because we need not to look for empirical evidence to know that this piece of knowledge is necessarily true. It's true. This is based on a priori reasoning. Now, if we say that it is based upon definition, the definition of a bachelor is that a man who is unmarried. Again goes back to analyticity. Instead of explaining bachelor, who is a bachelor, it again stick to the synonymy. So the attempt to explain analyticity in terms of definition faces a failure, since it cannot explain it. Rather, it goes back to the notion of synonymy. And since we have already discussed that synonymy cannot explain analyticity, and it rather takes us again to the problem of analyticity. So we are facing a circularity problem. Another attempt has been made to unearth analytic synthetic distinction, to justify analytic synthetic distinction, and that attempt is based on the principle called interchangeability salva veritate. Two terms are interchangeable salva veritate in a statement that contains one of them. It can be interchangeable without changing truth value. So for example, John is a bachelor. So now John is an unmarried man. So the terms unmarried man and bachelor, they are synonymous and can be interchanged without changing truth value. And this principle and this interchangeability principle is based on salva veritate. This is attributed to Leibniz. Now, can we at all justify the cleavage between analytic and synthetic based on interchangeability? By dint of interchangeability, is it possible? Well, if we scrutinize interchangeability principle, we shall see there are certain loopholes. For ability criteria is based on the principle of salva veritate, that is basically attributed to the philosopher Leibniz. So there are numbers of difficulties to base analytic synthetic distinction on interchangeability. Actually, to account for the analyticity based upon interchangeability criteria, there are certain difficulties. Number one, there are certain contexts in which we cannot actually interchange one term with its another synonymous term without changing truth value. Contexts such as opaque contexts in reporting speech. If we attempt to interchange one term with its synonymy, then it may lead to the change of truth value. For example, John says that mammals are creatures with heart. John says mammals are creatures with heart. Now, if I interchange the phrase creatures with heart with the synonymous phrase creatures with kidney, and then the whole sentence, John says mammals are creatures with kidney. But John actually said that mammals are creatures with heart. But although it is the phrase creatures with kidney is synonymous with the creature of heart, these two phrases are synonymous. But one thing has to be remembered, that these two synonymy is based upon extensional synonymity. Extensionally, they are synonymous, not cognitively or intentionally. So in that case, that will change the truth value of the entire statement. So now So in that case, it will lead the change of truth value. There are certain other cases in which interchangeability criteria also does not work, and it faces difficulties leading to change of truth value. For example, John is the author of the book Happiness. Imagine that Happiness is the title of a book authored by John. So now instead of, if we say joyfulness is a book authored by John, although happiness and joyfulness, these are two synonymous terms, but each of the term cannot be interchanged with another. It will change the truth value. So there are many contexts in which interchangeability criteria does not work, and it faces failure so as to establish analyticity. So we cannot establish analyticity, we cannot justify analyticity on the basis of interchangeability principle as well. So to sum up the whole discussion, we can say that analyticity first seemed to be definable by an appeal to a realm of meanings. Okay, and on refinement, the appeal to meanings gave way to an appeal to synonymy or definition. But definition turned out to be the will o' the wisp, and synonymy turned out to be best understood by dint of a prior appeal to analyticity itself. So we are back at the problem of analyticity. So the entire attempt to justify analyticity, either based on synonym meaning, then on refinement synonymity, then one step ahead by an appeal to definition, then an appeal to interchangeability, all involves circularity problem, and it again lead us back to the problem of analyticity. So any attempt to explain analyticity by an appeal to meaning, synonymy, definition, interchangeability, logical impossibility are all vicious. They are all involves circularity fallacy. So the conclusion of the first criticize of the first dogma can be stated this way. Number one, the cleavage between analytic and synthetic cannot be drawn. The distinction cannot be drawn. Okay. We cannot really make sense of analyticity. What really is analyticity? And so the distinction between analytic and synthetic cannot be drawn. And that is why analytic synthetic distinction is a metaphysical just a metaphysical article of faith, an unempirical dogma of empiricist, in Quine's word. So we cannot really make sense of what is analyticity, and on the basis of which he is just dismissing the cleavage between analytic and synthetic truths. So the distinction, the boundary cannot be drawn, and the distinction between analytic and synthetic statement is just a metaphysical article of faith and unempirical dogma of empiricist. So now what are the effects of dismissing the division between analytic and synthetic statements? This is the most important part of Quine's paper. Now the first one is that it blurs the boundary between speculative metaphysics and natural science. Simply put, God as a speculative metaphysical topic, and natural science, which attempt to describe physical objects, God physical objects, although it seem to belong to different domains. One belong to the domain of speculative metaphysics, another belong to the domain of natural science, but this boundary has been blurred, uh, and this boundary has just been discarded. There is no such boundary at all are God, and natural physical objects are both cultural pursuits. And the second effect is that we should proceed towards pragmatism, a call to proceed towards pragmatism, that we shall be discussing in our subsequent videos, that what he meant by pragmatism. So for now, let me wind up the discussion.